and welcome to TORtalk. During this 10-minute screencast, I will be sharing my findings of a recent focus group where myself and a small group of students got together to discuss and explore student engagement in assessment and the assessment process. This project is part of my Masters in Learning and Teaching in Higher Education at London Metropolitan University. So let's touch upon the starting points for this project, using two key terms explored by the theatre practitioner Peter Brook. Let's look at the how and the why, starting with the why. As a tutor in theatre arts, I have found that semester after semester, an assessment within assessment process evokes feelings of confusion, fear and anxiety within a lot of my students. And I wanted to find ways through partnership with those students to develop new methods to tackle this. As for the how, my chosen methodology for this project was to create focus groups, to foster, build and generate an opportunity to openly discuss with students about their experiences, creating a partnership where together we can affect change. Through the process of this investigation, I wanted to build upon the ethos strategies that London Metropolitan University uses and will continue to explore. I have rooted this project within the ESJ, the Education for Social Justice Framework, the Student Partnership Agreement, and the University Assessment Framework. And it is this particular document that cites the work of Lorna Earle and her categories of assessment. Assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. By finding ways to employ all of these and exploring these within my focus groups, I hope to begin to dismantle the anxiety, illuminate the process, and find ways to complete the learning loop for my students. So let's have a look at the focus groups. I hosted two groups and they both took place online. They were also made up of students from theatre and film, and we concentrated our discussions upon the first year module of comparing theatre and film. I wanted to create a focus group that was supportive, open and with kindness, to have an environment where the students would be empowered to share their thoughts and opinions. At the start of both these sessions, I used the polling tool to quickly gauge what their understanding was of the mechanisms that make up assessment. In both these groups, it became apparent that there was a mixed level of knowledge and understanding. Some knew what learning outcomes were, some did not. Some knew what assessment methods were, and some did not. But none of them really understood how these two key elements connected with each other and formed part of their learning experience within assessment. It was this disconnect that I knew needed to be explored, and together we would find ways of bridging this gap. This exercise highlighted to all of us and brought an awareness of what the students knew, what they didn't know, but most importantly, what the students didn't know that they didn't know. So what was the next step to change this and complete the learning loop? From this initial exercise, we moved on to use another tool, and that was of whiteboards, upon which I placed a simple statement: how do you feel about assessments? So this shift was from a purely inquiry tool to a method of connection with students on an emotional level. As you can see from both of these whiteboards, there are a range of responses. Some differ and some unite the students. They have an understanding of why assessment is important. There is a sense of optimism, but there is also an edge of dread and anxiety. Now that they have been able to share how they felt, we spent some time discussing different opinions before moving into the main exercises of the focus group. The first of which was unpicking the learning outcomes from this module. Now, this particular exercise came about from a discussion I had with a colleague from AAD, James Hunting, and it was to get the students to rewrite the learning outcomes in their own words. And that is what we did. And here is a selection of rewritten learning outcomes. Now, the original learning outcomes cannot change themselves, but this was an excellent exercise for the students to unpick, find a deeper meaning, and make them make sense to them in their own words. Now, once they made sense to the students, we would then be able to pinpoint where these could be housed within the learning assessments. This is a tangible method that I will be taking back into my own teaching practice. Now, the next step was to connect these with the assessment methods. At the start of our discussion about this topic, the students were quite vague. They sort of knew where they joined together, but there wasn't a strong understanding, and they were all lacking in specificity. We needed to find space within each of these where the learning outcomes could be achieved. We knew that the summative assessments within this module could not be changed, but that we could make amendments to the formative points. Through discussion, it became clear that the students and myself were on the same page, and we wanted to find ways to make space for more reflection within their formative assessments, to know and check if the learning has taken place. We thought about and discussed a range of methods of reflection that could take place at different points in their learning that would make them able to be aware of their learning, so that in turn assessment would become part of their learning. So we discussed different methods of building and developing reflective practice. And these boiled down to 3 strands: the personal, what took place in class time, and what could take place between the tutor and the student. So let's look at the personal. I put it to the group that a way to enable personal reflection would be to use the WebLearn tool of journals, together with structured questions to help guide their reflections. This will enable the students on an individual basis to form a record of their development, their learning and understanding in one place, and to be able to look back and chart their own progression, learning and understanding of the learning outcomes as well. And let's look at what could take place in class time. We looked at building in time during class periodically throughout the semester to join in group discussion on their learning and how this related to the learning outcomes, bringing the module guide off the page and into a lived experience, to take ownership as a cohort, to see how the discussions and the understandings that is brought about through this shared experience is part of learning, both within subject-specific topics, but also in developing assessment literacy. And then we move into the final strand, and that is tutor-based reflection. Now, we all know that students really enjoy getting feedback from their tutor, and this came up again, but we wanted to make it an actual realistic way. How could this continue to develop within time constraints that tutors and students always have within the actual module themselves? So we came up with a possibility that if the time was allowed, that during class time, perhaps halfway through, or would take place over a couple of weeks, we could introduce a halfway point small tutorial. Another suggestion was made that the students should set their own agendas for these tutorials. This would enable them to pinpoint what elements of their learning they would like to discuss within the tutorial with the tutor. It is this partnership with their tutor that will be encouraging the students to feel empowered and to take charge of the conversation. So here we move into our final thoughts, and here are some of the final thoughts that the students within the focus group wrote about the experience of the project and the learning that took place within this project. It is this that brings me to my own experience and my own learning. I set out to explore student engagement in assessment and the assessment process. By carrying out this focus group, it became clear that students had a strong awareness of what they knew, but they did not have a strong awareness of what they didn't know. It was through the use of exercises and the following discussions within the focus group that brought about new methods to bring light to assessment, the mechanisms that are held within it, and how they can relate to the students' learning and within the assessment process. By carrying out this project, I have been able to highlight to the students and for myself where the gaps are, and through partnership with the students, develop methods and mechanisms to change this for future cohorts. It is the exercises, discussions and offers of change that I will take back into the next academic year. And by monitoring the implementation of these, I will be able to gather further data to see if they have been able to generate a greater understanding of assessment, create agency within the students to be part of the process, and improve upon engagement with assessment and the assessment process. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope this has been useful for you. If you wish to continue these conversations, please do get in contact with me. Thank you so much. Bye.